All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Profit Playbook podcast. I am your host, Tyler Narducci. And before we dive in, if you get any value from these episodes at all, please consider dropping us a like or subscribe. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Today, I have the pleasure of having Benny Rubin here with us on the show. Benny is an email deliverability expert with tons of knowledge in sales, marketing, and the email landscape. He's a 3X entrepreneur with one sale, one failure, and is now running his current company, Senders. Benny's team has overseen cold emails that have generated hundreds of millions in the pipeline and garnered interested responses from massive companies such as Starbucks, Visa, Equinox, Coca-Cola, and more. Benny's team has facilitated the sending of over 30 million emails in the last 12 months alone and is eager to demystify cold emailing, debunk common myths, and help business owners leverage cold email while avoiding the ever scary spam folder.
Getting
So,
scarier by the day.
scarier by the day. I know that spam folder will definitely catch you. Benny, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure to be here.
So I'm pumped to have you here. So we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about your
Sure,
agency and how
sure.
you grew it to where you're at right now. We're also going to talk about email deliverability, and
Mm,
cold email as a whole, which is your specialty. So let's first start off kind of on your agency and where you're at now. Can you just give
sure,
the audience a little bit of background on when you started and how you grew it, and how big it is now?
sure. So, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try to make this as actionable and useful for your audience as totally possible. But I think what you'll find is that I'm one of those people that has all the energy you need to do the sales while also attempting to manage clients. And I managed to clear so much of my day to do that on a day-to-day basis, especially in the early stages of my company. And most of the people listening will be like, well, geez, that's kind of crazy. That's like a tremendous amount of work. And so I'm really excited to talk with you because you're basically unlocking that for agency owners themselves so they can actually concentrate on clients and leave that sales portion or that daily hustle and grind you need in order to grow and get clients in the door,
And
plus
you're a
elements
professional
of
grinder.
fulfillment. Yeah, you know what I mean? So what
Love it.
happened with me was I had a company in my first phase of my life in my 20s. It was an agency. Believe it or not, I started in like 2009, 2010. It was a social media content creation agency. And at the time there were like three of them. I know if you're a slightly younger person listening to this, you think that it was like air and water, but at the time there was no water. Water didn't exist back then. No, there was no social media really. So when companies were saying, okay, now we have to care about social media. You remember? I don't know if you remember. I actually don't know how old you are, Tyler, but it was a pretty new thing. It existed for a while, but didn't really have a space for brands and entertainment entities in it. And then at a certain point, Facebook's rise, Twitter came out, brands started to wake up to this, and they needed help with content creation. So I started a company that created content for brands and entertainment entities. And we had a lot of clients and it was great, but that made me an accidental B2B marketer.
Hmm.
And I built that agency in the most old school hard way you could possibly do, which is through warm connections, through going to events, through sliding past security people to shake hands with someone that looked like someone that I need to talk with, through begging, like standing in
Yeah.
lobbies of buildings and like happening to bump into people that I met with that had, hadn't signed the deal with me, like all this sort of silly stuff that you used to have to do more of. And now we kind of can all do most of that digitally. LinkedIn wasn't even really a thing then. Especially, I was doing this in the Japanese market where there wasn't even that. So my second company, we built and sold that. And actually, interestingly, we sold it to a company not dissimilar to yours, Tyler. So there was a
Nice.
company that was outsourcing parts of the social content creation to us. And then we turned around and said, hey, we have all these clients and we have this revenue and we want to move on to something else. And then they bought us because they'd already worked with us and they'd already been working. So it was almost like you being bought by one of your agency partners or something, like kind of a
Yeah.
similar feeling. which maybe now or maybe in a later stage of your business, you'll get into the M&A business and you'll start to supernova companies together. Or maybe you're already doing that. So to jump forward a little bit, I started a second company that was early in influencer marketing, roughly. I was not the right founder for that. And there's a sort of grating feeling that I often find with founders that aren't a good fit for their companies. It's sort of an uncomfortable feeling where they have a pretty intense sort of imposter-like feeling all the time. And sometimes people just blame themselves, like, oh, well, I am the imposter and I don't really deserve to be here. But sometimes you actually just aren't a good fit for the company you're trying to build. So when we figured that out, and the folks who invested in us sort of agreed, and the folks who wouldn't invest in us reinforced that, we shut it down. And then I did the thing that I think a lot of your listeners did, which was look at the skills you have and look at your friends, acquaintances, the people you can reach, and say, okay, what can I do to serve these folks? And my guess is it was similar for you too. You said, well, I know all these digital marketing agencies that aren't good at the things that I'm really good at. Maybe I should turn my attention to helping them.
Yeah.
So I did something similar. Is that how you ended up where you are?
So for me, I started out, doing a lot of the social media stuff as well, because
Mm,
even, it was a few years later in 2015, but even then, I mean, you had a lot of boomer run companies
yep.
that knew that they needed to get into social. Like, they were very
Hmm.
aware of the rise in the need for social, but they were scared of it or didn't want to
Yep.
touch it or didn't believe that they were the best for it. And so there was this massive opportunity at the time for the millennial generation
Yep.
to kind of step into this role. And a lot of the older generations kind of just trusted the younger generations to do
Yep.
that. And so I got my first marketing gig working in a brand, running the social,
Makes
learned how
sense. Yeah.
great I was at it, and then was like, I can go get clients doing this and scale
Yep.
up a lot better. Did that, and then kind of continue to grow. As the agency grew, I said, well, it took me a good little chunk of time to really get all these systems and processes down, the lead gen, the sales part, the
Yep.
fulfillment part. And then I realized, like, gosh, if I had something that simplified this and provided the service for these things from the very beginning, I would have been able to grow so much faster. And so I
Mm,
created the thing that I would have needed several years back to be
makes
able to
perfect
get there
sense.
faster.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think that starting from the need seems to be where a lot of agencies get a little bit tripped up, because it's easy to convince yourself of, well, everyone needs digital marketing and I'm a digital marketer, therefore everybody needs me. And that
Mm,
isn't actually the way that customer and client demand works. In my case, I got really good at doing cold email when I was doing my agency that failed, or not agency, my software thing that failed. And when I turned my attention to all my friends who were entrepreneurs, yes, there were other ways they could do cold email, but they had said, well, you're good at that and we're not good at that. So why don't you do that for us? And that
mhm,
really is the genesis of this kind of agency business. What happened though is that cold email was relatively easy to do in 2016, and it got progressively harder. And in 2020, Google started to clamp down on allowing people to send emails at any sort of volume that was easy. And
mhm,
so I hired technical people and I said, okay, there's a key technical challenge here, which is how do you send cold emails at any sort of scale without becoming someone whose entire life is just trying to avoid Google and Microsoft slapping you down. That's a really weird uh, existence, in my
yeah,
opinion. You sort of like someone that buys like a really crazy, cool, fancy, fast car, and then your whole life becomes memorizing every single speed trap and every single and going 120 and then going down to 60 and then going 120. That seems to be how people were doing this. So I hired some technical folks, really smart people, and we spent a lot of time trialing and erroring. And what we realized was that if you can safely get cold email after you figure out how to do it well, you get it to a good scale and are able to maintain it, that actually becomes a very reliable lead gen channel.
yeah.
And so we turned our attention to focusing just on the technical side of email. And now of the 80 clients or so we serve, only 20 or so of them rely on us for copywriting and sort of traditional lead gen style stuff. And the other 60 rely on us mainly for the email infrastructure, which email is really only a few elements. There's domains, there's IP addresses, there's DNS records, and then there's sort of a bunch of softer things like making sure you're not having spam keywords and some other elements. So we
Yeah.
put all of our energy on managing email infrastructure for companies that need email to function properly over time, sometimes at a high volume, sometimes at a medium volume, 400 to 4,000 emails per day. And that's sort of where that's the kind of company that we built.
Very nice. So I guess, how did you make the transition from the software uh, company to that? You're just like, I'm better at this. Let me go do it for myself and do lead gen for the agency to find cold email clients, or how did you, I
I
guess,
did,
ramp up your client list?
well, what happened was I took a contract job doing it for one company.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood all these processes and understood how it was all coming together. So when I had the opportunity to take on another client, it was relatively easy for me to do it. But also, I think that there's something you probably have this in your business genetic code, and I definitely have this in my business genetic code. One client is a employer, basically. Two clients, a little bit of a balancing act. Three clients, okay, your hands are getting kind of full. But really, to build an agency, 10 clients minimum, for me, that
Yeah.
was not nearly enough, because that meant that one client leaving was 10% of your client base leaving. So you really do need certain amounts of commodities of scale. And I remember having a conversation with my good friend who was also building an agency when I was at maybe like 25 or 30,000, maybe $30,000 a month in revenue, where I basically said something to the effect of like, this is the trough of like death. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, it's not enough money revenue wise to really hire good people. And it's not enough revenue that, and you need a lot of clients in order to support that amount of revenue.
Yeah.
So you end up working a lot, and you really have to be there for your clients, and you can't really outsource or like bring in team members very much. But
Yeah.
also clients feel it at that level. It's like, wow, Benny, you have a lot going on. Meetings start to get a little bit tricky, and you know what I mean? They start to have this thing.
Yeah.
And then I was also doing sales for my own company. So if I would sell, then you're juggling sales calls and, you know, like that
It
kind of
gets
thing.
heavy
So
quick.
it gets heavy quick. So what I realized was that the only way out was through. So I sort of had a discussion with myself. I even have like an old journal that I wrote at some point. Like I was like trying to work this out of my head, not with like numbers. I mean, the mental game. Said, okay, if I'm going to get this past 50, 70, 80K a month, which is where this really needs to be to feel somewhat stable and comfortable, I'm going to have to work really,
Yeah.
really hard. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to have to stop being the guy that does like, 8 hours in the zone. It's going to be probably 10 to 12 hours in the zone. I'm probably going to have to do 2, 4 hours, maybe on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm really going to have to, because what happens is you do a client call. I mean, everyone listening to this knows this inside and out. And so do you. Every client call produces maybe even 6 to 10 action items, and each one only takes 5 minutes each. It's 2 hours per call. If you have 20 clients, well, and you want to meet them weekly, and I didn't want to sacrifice things like go to once per 2 weeks, and because I understood what a good level of service was. Long story short, you end up with this exploding calendar,
Mhm.
and when you also realize that it's actually relatively tricky, at least for me, to find folks that were reliable enough at the price point that made sense, that could relieve anything, because I was really, quote, really good at this. So the real turning point is, I should say, for everybody, is when you can hire people that are not a drain on your resources or a drain on your time, that are actually better than you or different than you in the same thing. So then you feel like, well, wow, this copywriting is great. I guess I could have written it too, but this is legit too. Cool.
Yeah.
So there's that many turning points, but I think I estimate, and I hope everyone's sitting down, but I think I estimate that I spent close to 1,000 hours of sales calls, sales prep, post-sales calls, negotiation, etc., just to cross a 7-figure annual run rate.
Wow. And you did all those 1,000 hours yourself?
Just myself, yeah. No one else was involved in sales. Now,
Wow.
keep in mind that there's a reason why I'm telling the story. So normally I tell the story, or if I tell the story to someone, their assumption is, well, gosh, either Benny's exaggerating. Okay, fine. 20% exaggeration either way. Still 800 hours, right? It doesn't really matter that much
Right.
where you slice it. Was it a lot of work? Well, no, because I really enjoy meeting founders of companies and marketing directors and VPs of sales and learning about their business and understanding what their challenges are. The other thing is I didn't have a heavy proposal process because I only do one thing. A, we help scale cold email. Do you need help? Tell me about what you're doing with email. Tell me about the problems you're facing. Oh, no problems at all. Well, you want more scale. Okay, let's work on it. So the sort of repetition elements really help. And then you start to understand what makes people's eyes light up and what doesn't, and when people ghost you and why they don't ghost you, and when people are excited and when they're not excited, and what it looks like when someone really needs to sign quickly and someone who's going to drag their feet. And does it
It's
take
called
one call?
learning while doing.
Oh yeah, for sure. But at the other side of this is what I felt, and maybe you felt this too in the scaling process, you really have to have nothing better to do.
Well, or priorities in line, because better subjective. Better could have been laying on a beach at any time for me, but it was not my priority. I wanted
Oh
to
yeah.
grow the business, right? Better
Yeah.
was a lot of things.
Priorities night.
But
Okay, fine. I'll give you that. Priorities are a better way to phrase.
yeah.
But what I was going to say is that this all matches up with me having the type of personality, not saying that it's a good personality, not saying that it's better than anybody, because everyone's different and everyone has their unique things. But I would, if I had 30 minutes between 2 client calls, I knew that I could do the client work at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. or on Saturday morning or something, but I knew that I couldn't do that sales call other than that time. And I was hungry to get through this growth phase. But I had one benefit, Tyler, that a lot of the agencies you're talking with now don't have, or the ones that are listening. But you have 2 kinds of listeners. You have the kinds that are clients of yours who do have a turnkey way to get those client meetings or potential client meetings set up, and then you have ones who don't. I happen to be in a good position and have a good lead engine that I built myself, of course, to get those calls. So I could do 5 to 15 sales calls a week at that time, which means that I could spend the 800 to 1,000 hours. Right?
Yeah.
No good deed goes unpunished. So if you're really good at generating the leads, then you really can fill 20 to 50 hours a week or whatever crazy number it is with those sales
But you
calls.
earned that. You put in the work, learned the high value skill, and then employed it until you found, and I guess I imagine we're getting there, that you had to find your breaking point. Because you could be the
Yes,
skilled
I
you could be
definitely
as
found my
skilled as
breaking point.
possible, but
Sure.
you had to break at some point where only one person can't handle that.
Yes.
So I imagine we're building to that, yeah?
Yeah, well, there's always a breaking point. I think that you're always in the process of breaking, you know what I mean? But again, like, I think part of the reason why I'm going down this path with this conversation anyways is that it's very rare that you find yourself in a position. I think everyone's capable of it, but it's very rare that you find yourself in a position where you throw the ball in the air, you swing the ball, you swing the bat, you hit the ball, you sprint out to retrieve the ball, you run back, and you do it again over and over and over again, and you have enough of a time span and enough balls without losing them, that you do this over and over and over and over again. And I
Yeah.
happen to have this like 2020 to 2021 and a half run, the pandemic, other things in my life just sort of made me capable of just sitting in a chair without that much else to do, really.
Yeah.
And you could sort of say like, yeah, well, everyone can do it. You can't really force yourself and find yourself in that kind of position. It only takes like one or two external things to knock you off that path. And we're talking about potentially 2 to 3 meetings, sales meetings a day on top of the client meetings a day. So these things really have to align. And I think a lot of people look down their year and they say, this is the year I'm going to grow. And then actually life gets in the way, or
Mm-hmm. Or
they
priorities,
put,
and they're not willing to put in that the work that you did.
sure, but I mean, work that I put in, I think a lot of people listening to this really do have the desire to grow a 7-figure plus agency. And they would, if they had someone like Tyler to queue up all the meetings they needed.
Yeah. But you
Yeah,
are kind of like, what I like about your story is like, and while I believe there's definitely an easier way, which is partnering with people that can automate that for you, but that easier way comes with investment, right?
sure.
Like you either have a lot of time or to
Hmm.
dedicate to something, or you have money to dedicate to something to get you there faster. And not
Yep,
everybody has the money to partner with a program or a coach or
that's
a
right.
lead gen partner, you know what I mean? And for those that don't and they're bootstrapping it, your story is extremely valuable in showing them that it is possible. Now I think where things split in reality is the cold hard facts are most
Mm.
people may want that and say, I'm willing to do it, but most people are not. When it comes down to it and the going gets hard and you have that 30 minutes, like you talked about, between those back to back sales calls, and you're going to squeeze in your client work right before you hit another sales call, like that's what really makes or breaks an entrepreneur on
Can
are
be.
you really cut out to do this? And it sounds like you were, but a lot of people struggle with that. So I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that it does work if you do put in the work. You know what I mean?
So that's a really fascinating point. So you're a B2B person. I'm a B2B person. Hopefully everyone listening is a B2B person, because this is really who this is relevant for. B2B always works because there's a
Yeah.
business person with some sort of need, and you can credibly fulfill that need. And the world works where no one has decided who the best B2B SEO agency is, or who the best B2B copywriting person is, or who runs the best whatever, whatever, whatever. So the intersection between the number of people who do a thing and who are available to do that thing is very, 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 very few. In other words,
Yeah.
if you do a sales call with someone and you say, hey, my team does SEO and we do, and you don't do something totally stupid and boneheaded,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to know and have the energy maybe to talk to 2 or 3 other SEO people or agencies maximum. And that means if they're going to choose someone, you have a 33% chance of closing. And if you're really good on the sales call, and I don't mean good like Mr. Sales Guy, you know your stuff, your pricing makes sense with their need, all these things sort of generally align, you could be in competition against no one. They could say, we need a new SEO partner because we're overwhelmed. In my case, hey, email deliverability seems kind of jank and we need someone to help with it.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll reach out to 2, but sometimes they'll just reach out to 1. Probably most of you listening, if you don't think I'm a complete idiot or asshole, you'd be like, if you're having the problem, you're going to reach out to Benny. Hey, I heard him on a podcast. It seems like a legit whatever. Like, we'll hear what he has to say. If that goes reasonably well and the pricing reasonably matches up, you're not going to really want to spend that much time trying to track down other experts and whatever. And if you do, the conversation won't even be apples to apples. Because Benny says A and they say B minus 2 plus 5, and you go, well, I think A seems simpler, and I'll try it out with Benny, rather than trying to suss out with this like B minus 2 plus 5 divided by 7 thing is that this other person's doing. In other words, you say I have a deliverability problem, and Benny says, hey, soup to nuts, we solve the problem first and foremost, and this is how much we charge. And the other guy says, oh, we sell warming software and we did this and that, and you need to, use outreach.io. You can't use outreach anymore. You need to move to seamless, and it's just like, okay, we go.
Yeah.
So long story short, what I'm saying is that B2B is really great because it's repeatable and because it's understandable. And the more times you do the work with a client, the better you do. And the more times you do the sales calls, the smoother you can get with it. And if you put the work in, you will grow, even if you're doing the most unbelievably commodified product or service you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Just like you built a content creation agency, I did. Okay. Or, we made money doing content. Well, anyone who can write the English language can do content. So how
Yeah.
are you able to build a business? And I was able to build a business all those years ago. Well, because other things align that make you an attractive person to work with
Yeah.
on this.
2 points
So,
there.
yeah.
One of the major ones is when you're just starting out, a common thread between you and me was that you leveraged the people around you.
Yeah.
So, like today, my main lead generation is paid ads. We also do LinkedIn and a lot of outreach. I have a community that I grow online, all that kind of
Cool.
stuff. And we help our clients do a lot of that as well to just get there a lot faster. But when you're bootstrapping, and you're just starting out, like you said, if you're good at, if you have a skill, reach out to, how do you make that connection that's a little bit stronger than, Joe Schmo off the internet who's offering the same thing at a relative price. You already have a connection with that person. So if you're starting an agency, tell your network, tell the people around you. You probably have way more business owners around you than you had any idea, and they already have a personal connection with you, and they would much prefer to go with you if they believe that you have the skill
Sure.
and the right price than a random person on the internet. And a lot of people, I think,
Yeah.
forget about that low
I
hanging
think they
fruit
forget
of
about that.
your network.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people just generally, your network, okay, fine. Even if it's a wholly network, if you really have no connections that are marketing leaders or founders of companies, obviously you have lots of them, Tyler, I'm speaking generally.
Well, now, but
There
just
might
the
just be
common person, yeah.
there might just be a mismatch. This might not
That
be the
too.
business that you're intended to start and build. Just
Yeah.
straight up. I think that most businesses, it's much easier. Well, there's a concept that I heard about in investing called people invest in lines, not dots. Are you familiar with this concept, Tyler?
No, go ahead.
I'm sure you can imagine, but this applies to relationships in general. A dot is a one-time meeting. You and I are meeting for the first time. That's a dot.
Mm-hmm.
This is the beginning of a relationship. The next time you meet, it's a line. Hey, last time you were doing this, how did that go? What are you doing? You said this. Last time you said you had X number of clients. Now why? Now is a line. There's a relationship. So it's easier for you to invest in me, hiring my team to help you with scaling or introducing you to one of your clients that's having a tricky problem that's kind of outside of your wheelhouse, whatever, when it's a line, not a dot. So I find I get a lot of cold emails, which is fine. They're not line-oriented cold emails. They're very dot-oriented. And that's okay. Sometimes a dot can turn into something. But really, the line-style relationships are just so much easier to deal with and manage. If, for
Yeah.
example, there's 100 guys that build AI chatbots, but I have one friend that I've known for a long time who got into that and is really good at it. Well, who am I going to hire, even if he's double the price? If I say, yeah, it's time for us to have a really jazzy chatbot on the website, am I going to hire some random person? Probably not. I'm going to invest in the line, not the dot. So I think that if you say, I want to start a digital marketing agency because I'm really good at SEO and I did it at one company and I was really good at it, and now I want to start an agency. Okay. Every time you're going to have a conversation with someone that's new is a dot. So it very well makes sense to keep your one client sort of in-house job and go say, okay, can I create 100 dots with people? Make up an excuse, have a conversation with them. Industry roundtables are really easy to set up because people do like to share information, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're really ready, I think, to have that agency leap conversation. Because now when you reach out to these 10, 20, 30, 50 CMOs or whatever, you say, hey, I decided to take on outside clients. That's how you can get your first 2, 3, 4, 5 clients, because they go, oh yeah, I know you. Because we had that interesting conversation about Google updates and we swapped information. And I liked the way you presented your thoughts and ideas. So that's all line oriented.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think you're right. There's sort of a feeling that people get, the world's so vast, there's so much competition. But most
Yeah.
people are investing in those line-based relationships, not in dots.
Yeah.
And it
And
can
I
get
think
easier that way.
it it could be, I mean, it could be even a small line, like,
Mm,
they've heard of you, they know of you through their friend. Like, you don't have to know, like, your parents and siblings don't have to be business owners themselves, but, like, how many people in that because of your parents, or that because of your siblings, or your cousin's best friend that you've seen a few times that owns a business. Like, if you really start thinking of your actual network and people that beyond just close family, but acquaintances, friends, and then you start telling people on social media about what you're doing, and about the results that you're getting. Those people in your immediate network then tell the people in their network that may have that need as it arises. Oh, my cousin Tyler also actually runs a social media agency. I saw you were looking for that. Let me connect you to. Those little things happen as soon as you just start telling your network. And like, that person that needs it was not in your friends list, but
yeah,
someone was that has that connection. And that's how a lot of digital marketing agencies get started. And then you're able
yeah,
to grow that skill, refine it, get better at it, and then kind of take it into a more cold setting where you're now kind of courting leads
sure.
that have
Well,
never heard of you through any connection.
that's why you build out a website with a lot of credibility in it. That's why you do a bunch of case studies. That's why, because what you're trying to do is get, by the time they set up the call with you or you set up the call with them, they can see the semblance of a line
Right.
through this. Okay, oh, that's right. I Googled this Benny character because I'm going to meet with its agency, and I found this conversation you did with Tyler, and I listened to it. That's also another form of creating line, because it's the dot is the podcast you listen to, even if you didn't listen to the whole
Yeah.
thing. You got a sense of it. Then you meet with someone on the team. Okay, the line creeps forward, and then it's like, okay, there's a relationship here. This kind of makes sense. That kind of thing. Partners are also similar, work in a similar way. We're
Yeah.
partners with Apollo.io. They send a lot of leads to us. That's really nice because they say, we trust Apollo. They said we should talk with you because we're having a specific problem that they said you're good at solving. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing
I
can happen
I'm
there.
curious on your on the breaking point before I
Oh,
dive over into
oh
cold
yeah.
email. So, it sounds like for a while there you were like, Iron Man, just taking on everything yourself, the
Yeah, well,
sales, the
I had
lead
some
gen,
help.
the
Like
fulfillment.
I brought in account management. I tried to build a little team that could do all the things that
Well,
um
you didn't at first. You were all doing it all yourself, and then I imagine at
well
some point you had to,
well
right?
I think that account management style thing. So I think of account management differently probably than most folks. We were running cold email in software like Apollo.io, or if people who do e-commerce agencies run it in Klaviyo, that kind of thing. So we
Mhm.
had like a piece of software that managed to do anything in enterprise software. For everyone who's listening, they know this: 1 million clicks. These aren't like swipe to the right, like flick this. Like these are like, you click the menu, click, 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 click. So to set up a sequence, we're talking, 20 to 100 clicks. It's crazy. So really early on, I brought in people that were really good at just doing the processes. So all the brain work and the planning I would do with the client, kind of figure it out. And then it's like, okay, someone needs to get this template, da 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 da, get all this stuff prepped and ready to go. So I hired folks that were really good at like that and trained them how to do it, QA it, click, 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 all that stuff. So that's great. I think the first order of business for most folks is figure out how to get clients, then have enough revenue that you can bring in someone to do that account click level stuff.
Yeah.
The breaking point, or the sort of realization point, is when you're actually able to get closer to replacing yourself in a scenario where you used to be the star.
Yeah.
And most of the agency owners I know that get stuck at that like 10 to 12 client level, or even 5, but 10 to 12 client level, um, always think of themselves as the star of the show and say, I'm succeeding and things are going well because I'm uniquely special at this, and the client finds that I'm uniquely wonderful at this. And that's fine. Some people, they live their whole lives like that, and there's nothing wrong with it.
There's a
Me
huge ego
personally,
play that comes in at that point usually.
well, it's either a, a fallacious ego play, like it's not true, but
Mhm.
they feed the ego, or it's true. If it really truly is true, then you're stuck. So the question is, how can you test if it's not true? And if you can prove that it's not true. So what I did was I came across another cold email strategist guy who did things differently than me. We didn't agree on everything, but I liked his thoughts. And I said, okay, I'm going to hire this guy on an hourly basis, and I'm going to introduce him to my client and say, hey, we've been working together for a while. It's going okay. I want to
Mhm.
see if this other guy can do better than I'm doing. And this is him, and he's really good in all these ways, and he's really like has a different idea than I do, has a different background, different beliefs, different whatever. The client is game for the challenge because they know that I'm an arm's length away. So I
Yeah.
did two things. One is I brought in this person not as like, this is Tom. Or their name wasn't Tom, obviously. A new grad who knows jack nothing about nothing,
Yeah,
and
of course
they're
not.
cheap enough that I can hire them. I hired a dude $150 an hour, I don't remember what it was at that time, 100, 150, $200 an hour. I locked down a whopping 4 hours of his time or 2 hours of whatever it was. Can't remember. It was quite a few years ago now. And I put him on stage. I literally was like, my hands are tired. That kid I know is pretty good at piano. Let's see what he can do. I'll sit out a song and see if the crowd goes wild. And then the crowd goes wild.
Mhm.
Then you have a separate call with the client and say, how's it going with Logan? How's it going with Tom? How's it going with Jim? And then they tell you, oh, it's
And you're talking
interesting.
about account manager specifically
Well,
or the
I
or
call them
fulfillment or
strategist
fulfillment?
account. No, I'm talking about, well, it's all mixed up. But what I mean is that we're talking about a client facing person, because oftentimes what you'll
Client base.
find is the client facing side is the side where the ego really gets fed. And
Mhm.
most people, like in your case, even if I was a crazy master at content creation, let's say, and
Mhm.
I hired your team to help me with the content creation fulfillment, I can always QA it before it gets to the client if I want to, before I have trust. It's
Mhm.
the client meeting, it's that face to face where the client, that comfort that most people get tripped up on, and they feel like, well, it's really important that I show up because they really like me and they trust me. So what I did was I found other people that could do elements of this better. And then the second thing was, once that got comfortable and the client said, no, I like what this guy's saying. Maybe I like it better than what you were saying. I'm like, wow, okay, geez. Um,
That's such a
you
win
st-
though. In
it
my
can
in my
be.
opinion, it is a huge win.
You start to load that person up. It's a huge win. Yeah. You start to load that person up with resources. And you provide those resources to your agencies, which is
Mhm.
unbelievably powerful. In my case, there weren't anyone or wasn't anyone like you around. So I had to obviously build, cultivate, master my own resources. So then you start to get in the game of, okay, well, this person is really good at dealing with clients. Now the client trusts
Yeah.
them, but that person isn't quite as good at copywriting as I was because I could do it all myself. So I'm going to give him a copywriter. And the first copywriter you give him is you, but then you can give him a copywriter. And I'm going to
Yeah.
give him someone that can do all the click, 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 so they don't have to do that. I'm going to give them resources. So if someone like you is involved, you can be the resources that you're giving an account manager or whatever you want to call that person, or
Yeah.
account strategist, sometimes account manager, whatever. So what you end up with is you're not hiring junior people and passing them off and hoping that it goes okay, pissing the client off. You're trying to level up a few of the things, someone that's slightly better than you or good at you, introducing the client with a really strong, hey, there's a reason why I want to bring this person in. It's not just because I'm lazy and want to go do other things. Then loading that person up with the resources and asking them constantly, what can I do to make this easier for you? What do clients need that we're not doing that we should be doing? What more resources do you need? What resources do you need? And then over time, you can build a small team of these people that are serving clients in a way. And then when you jump in and you give your ideas, you'll find that clients just aren't as excited about your ideas anymore
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
excited about the other person's ideas. and that's okay.
That
And then that's when I actually graduated and built the business.
Yeah, totally. That was, I think, one of the biggest turning points in my own agency growth was like, at the beginning, it's all you. You're the face, you're the lead gen, you're the sales, you're the fulfillment, you're
People loved
everything,
you,
and
I'm
and a lot
sure.
of your clients that yeah, it's as much of a personal brand as it is an agency brand in the beginning for a lot of digital marketing agencies. Um,
Yeah.
but the biggest when you start like that, in my opinion, one of the biggest wins is being able to bring in team members, and I'll kind of splice this out in a second because I think a lot of people do this, in my opinion, kind of the wrong way. They try and get enough clients
Mhm.
so that they can afford the salaries of full-time employees.
Sure.
And in that
Yeah, I didn't
process,
do that.
they're breaking. Yeah, I didn't think so. But I know a lot of
Yeah.
people that because I've worked with so many agencies at this point that I find this is everywhere. And I'm like, no, 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 that's completely backwards. I mean, at least as far as what really worked for me and what we work with our clients on is like you don't actually have to break yourself with all this client work to be able to afford this full-time salary to be able to then hire, then try and train them in real time because you already have the client that needs the services already, and
Mhm.
then put them on there. Like you can bring in white label partners or contractors that you've vetted, that you've tested, that are good, that are paid for by the client as they come in. And they're scalable with you because they have the capacity, but you're not paying for them unless
Yeah.
you've been paid for by the client, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I think the digital marketing agency model is better in a lot of ways than a lot of other business models because a lot of other business models, I don't think they have that luxury. Um, they kind of have to make the revenue before and then hire the employees and so on and so forth. But with the digital marketing agency model, there's so many phenomenal freelancers out there and
Yes.
really good,
I
you
think that
know,
that's the key. That's the key, Tyler. You find people that their idea, for me, when I found people early on, when I was trying to make that transition to get out of the vice, like that locked feeling of like, well, okay, so every Tuesday from 2 to 4:45 p.m., that time is dead now. That's devoted to this real slice of revenue, and I'm gonna have to mark it on my calendar until 2030. That's scary, especially if you're doing that 30. At one point I had 35 weekly recurring meetings on my calendar. That's a lot.
yeah.
It's crazy. So
That is a lot.
you start to ask the question of who is out there that's better than me at one of these things or two of these things. And in my case, it costs $150 an hour, but sometimes that's not
Mhm.
the the cost of it. But even in my case, I figured out that there were these people that were really good at the strategy part, but didn't really want to deal with, let's say, the copywriting or all the clicking required to do it, or lead like data cleaning or like all these other elements. So, but each of those resources is also not that crazy expensive. To have someone that's really good at uh,
Yeah.
checking interested replies and marking them as interested or not interested, so the data
Especially
is
if it's
nice and clean.
replicable systems and
Yeah,
processes that you have,
exactly.
created SOP,
Yep,
standard operating procedures for. You have
yep.
videos that walk through, and it's a step by step. You train somebody, and then they just repeat that process over and over
That's
and
right.
over internally.
That's right.
They're not client facing, so they don't have to, they don't have
Right.
to interact. They just have to repeat this process. And you can, we got Loom. You could record your
Yeah,
screen nowadays, teach them how to do that thing, and bring on and
yeah.
take that off your
So
shoulders.
at a certain point, it really is nice to bring in full-time people. And the
Yeah.
reason why it makes sense to bring in full-time people largely is that um, you have enough clients to justify it. So instead of someone at
Mhm.
$100 an hour for 4 hours a week or 5 hours a week, which can be tricky and scheduling and this, that, the other thing, you start to say, okay, well, maybe I can get someone great at 40 an hour, 50 an hour, 60 an hour, but have it locked in for all time. And it really just has to do with the kind of person and the moment they are in their life and how they feel about things and their relationship with you and whatever it
Yeah.
is. So it can get a little bit, but I tested people that on this hourly kind of thing that really did not work out. And it's very disruptive to bring someone in, the client starts to like them, then you have to get rid of them or whatever. There's
Mhm.
always like some friction that has to be dealt with. But if you're the constant, then you can build a relatively stable feeling for the client. And
Yeah.
that stability is usually why clients, or it's important to clients, just like it is for pets or children or something too, you know,
Yeah.
like
I
that
think that
feeling
was
that they're getting something consistent.
one of the proudest moments that I can remember in the journey of my agency was when I removed myself from a lot of the core processes and put in people that, like were better at me on their
Yeah.
specific thing. Because, while I was good at the entire agency, maybe I wasn't like the best expert at this one specific thing, but I brought in someone that was, right? And
Yeah.
they may not be good at this thing, but they're great at that thing. And so that thing is getting done better now in the agency. But the best part was getting that like really positive client feedback of your clients raving about your employee or your contractor and not you, but they're
Yep.
raving to you about how awesome XYZ
Yep.
person has been. And like it is like the proudest moment and the best moment because it's like, wow, clients are super happy, have a great team member. And I wasn't the one that had to do that thing at the end
Yep.
of the day,
Well,
and so it's the best.
it actually is a really good moment, because if the client's happy and it's not at your expense, that's a really nice thing,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
right? Like,
huge.
you know, the surgery was successful, but the patient died, is sort of the feeling you get when when someone's super happy. You've poured a lot of your own personal heart and soul into work with a client, and then the client's like, "You've been great. This was some of the best 3 months of work that I've ever had done. I'm going to end our
Yeah.
contract now, but I want you to know." And you're just like, "What?" You know, because things
Yeah.
change, business change, you know,
Yeah.
or "I want you to be working on this with us forever." And you're just like,
Yeah.
"Wow, okay, this is." I'm not sure if that's a reward or a punishment in a certain sense, because it sort of means that there's a cult of personality that has locked you into this relationship with someone. When, if you're really good at this and you're really good at systems, you can provide something of value to them where it doesn't have to be personality driven and charisma based and this person is the magical person. You can be someone that has a magical process for your company, or a magical whatever. I say the word magical because it sounds very fancy, but it gets the job done in the way that they
Yeah.
need and can rely on. And it is a really great feeling when you find that you can find and train other people. In my phase, I'm not doing very much hiring anymore, and I want to have the people that are on my team for a long, long time.
Yeah.
um, which is a slightly different phase than a lot of folks are in. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was growing, I always had the goal of removing myself from those processes. And I think, in my opinion, when you bring on those new people, sometimes they're going to be better than you were at the jump, and that's great. A lot of other times, they may be very good at what they do, but maybe they're not better than you on
Yeah.
that specific task for that specific client. And you have to be willing to take a small dip in
Mm.
performance during that next few months in order to get to the other side of that, which is now they're locked in to our processes, to our systems, and now they've brought their expertise, married that with your processes,
Mm.
and now they're doing equal or better than you were before. When you bring
Yeah, I
in a
see what
brand
you
new
mean.
person, you're gonna oftentimes experience a little bit of dip, and that's painful and hard for an agency owner that's really very controlling of their processes and their clients and their outcomes. And I totally get that. And that's why a lot of agency owners struggle with passing off tasks. But if you can, believe in the hire that you bring on or the contractor and really help them through those first few weeks, those first few months, on the other side, watching them excel past where you were doing without your hand in it
Mm.
is so worth it. It's so
Can be,
worth,
for sure.
that
I
training.
think also a lot of times what I find folks in the agency world don't fully understand is that my mom was a middle school teacher. My mom always told me, she said, when you're standing up in the front of a classroom, because I went to the same middle school as she went to, the teacher can see everything. You can't hide from the teacher. The client is the teacher. So you think let's hope that they don't notice that this person is not quite 100% there. They notice.
Yeah.
They either notice consciously or subconsciously, but they notice. So what I always tell folks that are building companies or systems, just partner with your client. Just partner with your client. Get on the same side of the table as the client. And you might say, why I'm bringing in a new copywriter. I'm really excited. We're going to have to really put them through their paces. We're going to have to test what they can do. I think they're really great. I think they're really awesome. This is the reason why I hired them, but they're not quite up on it yet. They're not quite there. Like, let's work together to like get this person to where they need to be. And you might think clients will be upset, or they're like, oh, cool, I love the challenge. And then they might say, oh, well, Benny or whoever the person before Benny, I'm Benny, by the way, would be, for those who are listening, we're like, who's this Benny person?
Yeah.
They might need your assurance. You might say, I'm going to be involved. I'm going to have a look at everything they're writing to make sure they're not sending you something that's, but I'm going to let some things go through because maybe you'll like it and I didn't like it. Maybe it's a value thing, and clients usually, unless it's like, totally high stakes craziness, usually clients are kind of interested in, okay, with a little test, little someone.
Yeah.
They can give feedback, they can be helpful, they can be useful. And I've had people that I thought, this person's 80%, they're not really ready for showtime. And I've had clients absolutely love them and rave about them. But when you really dig into it, you find that it's not 80% out of 100. It's 3-dimensional. And they're at 120% on a dimension that you weren't thinking about. Oh, she doesn't really know that much about my industry, but she's so calm that she really keeps the meetings focused. And Benny, you like to jump around a lot, which is kind of exciting, but I really enjoy that like 30 minutes of really focused meeting time. And I'm willing to sacrifice the fact that she doesn't know that much about my industry. Or I love the fact that she doesn't know that much about my industry, but she asks really good questions. And you're just like, well, I wasn't testing this person for question asking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that you partner with a client. That seems to be the golden ticket to almost everything.
Also when you're introducing new people in, like, ideally you've built a relationship with that client. They already know, love, and trust you. I mean, they signed on to work with you and in many cases. And if you're saying this person is great and you're vouching for them, a lot of clients are also going to, follow your lead. And if Tyler says that this person is great and that he's excited, then I'm excited too. I rarely have a challenge with clients where I'm like, this is going to be your account manager. This is going to be your, your LinkedIn campaign manager. They're phenomenal. Like, they know, and I'll be honest with my clients all the time. I'm like, James is our LinkedIn account manager and he is phenomenal at it, far better than I ever have been. So that's why he's a part of our team. He's the go-to guy, right? And that's all you really need to lay the groundwork, and you've passed the trust from you to your team member. Benny, this episode has flown by, and
oh my
because
gosh,
it's
what
just
time
been a
is
great
it?
conversation. I know we're already 53 minutes into this thing.
Well, we didn't even talk like quick. Listen, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing.
No. But I do. We had a phenomenal conversation. I think we
Maybe
actually
I could be
probably
a repeat
provided.
Guest.
We provided more
You ever
value, I
do
think, in
those?
this than absolutely. I think we talked about probably more important stuff than I even had as my original questions to ask you. So
Sure.
I'm not mad about it at all. I'm really quick.
If there's interest from your audience, like you get feedback from your audience, if there's interest from your audience actually doing a deep dive on email deliverability and mechanics and best practices and that kind of stuff, we can do another one. That's fine. If there's not a lot of interest, or folks are like, I'm glad I didn't have to go to deliverability school today, then that's also okay.
We'll have to get some feedback. I think with my audience, with my audience of digital marketers and agency owners, I can almost bet that our conversation today has been more valuable than the more niche conversation of email deliverability, because everyone can almost relate to everything we've talked about today. And on that note, while we still have 6 minutes, that I want to eke out 2 questions from you. So let's dive in on those. So first, you've built up your agency to 7 figures now, which is phenomenal. Congratulations. I want you to tell me, what the biggest difference in your opinion is, because there are huge differences, but what the biggest difference is between a 15, 20, 25K a month agency
Mm,
and a six-figure per month, seven-figure overall agency.
sure.
So they can kind of see that contrast.
There are two different kinds of agencies at that seven-figure, even much bigger um, level. And you have to make a decision as an agency owner which one you want to be. I made a decision early on that I wanted to have more clients that each pay me less money than a few clients that pay me a lot of money, or a lopsided sort of lumpy agency, or like a bell curve style agency. Where
Yeah.
you Does that make sense? So for
Yeah.
me personally, I did a lot of soul searching and thinking, and I realized that I want an agency, and I wanted, and I have. So it's nice. You can say it in all three tenses. I have an agency where no one client has the whole company in a tough position. That means that no one client can demand more than another client can demand, which takes the pressure off of my team to have to split between really important clients and not important clients. That means that we can build processes where everyone is equally important. Now, clients have different demands at different times, and that's okay. There's an ebb and a flow. But it means that we're not having a conversation internally where it goes, we have gold clients, silver clients, bronze clients, tin
Right.
clients. Oh, it's only this client. Forget it. Don't help them with that. Everyone becomes equal footing, and you can build a culture of service to the client because they're
Yeah.
all equally important. And it also means that if clients need to leave, it's not a personal or a death blow to your
To your
agency,
business. Yeah.
to your business. And that's important because you need to be a gracious loser. Churn is real,
Yeah.
and churn
No matter
happens.
how good it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Churn is real, and churn happens because there are basically three reasons why people churn. Most of the agencies listening are good agencies that don't really mess anything up. So, but there's one churn where like things get screwed up. Client goes,
Mhm.
"Hey, things are screwed up." They had to leave. The second one is the fit was there and the fit disconnects. That happens. Companies hit new milestones. Something changes. They need more or less or whatever, and that happens. And the third one is they actually graduate. They actually graduate from that station. So maybe you had built a network for them. They decided to shift to a CMO and all in-house model, and the moment comes and they need to stop, or the
Yeah.
opposite happens in some cases. So there's these three different kinds of churn, and if each one has 5% monthly churn for whatever reason, that compounds, or that adds up to being like 15% churn. That can be a lot of churn. So what I felt was having more clients meant that I could be a gracious loser. If someone needs to leave, I don't have to. I'm not stunned where it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I staffed up for this particular client. I don't have that. I can be like, oh, it was awesome working with you. This was really fun. Come back if you want. Do you want to pause instead of cancel? Do you want us to like do a month at half off and like try to figure out if there's a way to make the ROI equation work better based on your new scenario? You have all this levity and room. So that's a decision that I made early on, which fundamentally meant I need to build systems and structures, or let systems and structures be built, because you don't have to do it all yourself, as we talked about. Let systems and structures be built that can support the number of agencies, that the number of clients that I felt the company could bear. And I've mixed things up and messed things up. We're 10 people now. We were 20 people at some point. That was too many. 10 probably feels about right now. Maybe there's an ideal place for the number of clients we have that's higher or lower, whatever. Maybe some clients disagree. We're understaffed. Maybe some clients feel like there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't. This is all stuff you learn from
Yeah.
your clients. So I'd say that that's probably the number one thing, is making that decision early on of what kind of agency you want to build. And of course, there are people that take it even more extreme. They might have 500 clients that each pay $100 a month or something. I've never been able to fathom that level of client management. So
Yeah.
for
It's
me,
a lot.
this like 50 to 100 client range is typically where I've always been and where my main interest lies.
All right. Last question, rapid fire, because we're almost out of time here. But what it would be your number one piece of advice for a brand new agency owner who is just starting out today?
Understand your costs fully scaled. So yes, you have 100% profit margin now because you're doing 100% of the work,
Mm.
and you might be able to build pretty far that way. But think about your costs in terms of what it would be once you plug in other people to do certain things. So always be costing and understanding unit economics. The places in my business where I got tripped up was when I kind of didn't fully understand how the economics would change once I brought someone in to help with this or that, or how it would affect cash flow or all these things. So building those muscles before it costs you is probably a good thing to do. So that's, I would say, early on. And then, focus on the normal things. Lines, not dots.
Lines, not dots. Yes. Benny, thank you again so much for joining us. I think this conversation, while it was absolutely one of my most diverted podcast episodes from the original plan that I've ever had in 95 episodes. Still, I think I wanted it to keep going in the direction that we took because it ended up being super, super valuable and a lot of
I'm glad you thought
stuff
so.
that people
I hope your audience
definitely need to
thinks so
hear.
too. Any questions that come through, feel free to pass them along.
How can people reach out to you?
You can email me directly at benny@senders.co. You can reach out LinkedIn, school, Benny Rubin. I have curly hair. You probably can't miss me.
Perfect. Benny Rubin and then you got senders.co is the website, right? Perfect.
Senders.co.
Benny, again, thank you so much for joining us on the episode.